Hey, everybody. Today, we're having another episode of Out of the Fire podcast. And today I have two friends on this episode that we all used to work together, right, guys? So we are kind of doing a little bit of a family reunion or a HEDIS reunion. I don't know. What do you call it? And just kind of decided to jump on a call and talk about our learnings. And honestly, why don't we start with maybe John and Eric? You guys give a little bit of a introduction on yourselves, and then we'll go from there.
Go ahead, Eric.
Okay, thanks, John. My name is Eric Melymuk. I've been doing healthcare analytics and clinical quality data reporting for far too long now. I've spent many a year building quality reporting engines and measures that kind of power them. I'm currently at Progeny, which is a women's health and fertility benefits company. And we are working at a major data platform upgrade with a heavy focus on FHIR and interoperability.
My name is John Dobak. I have worked in healthcare data analytics for about 13 years. In 2019, I moved from the financial side to the healthcare analytics part itself, worked in creating and updating and maintaining quality measurements. And, at current, I work at Be Well Connected Health, where I am a FHIR analytical engineer.
Awesome. And I'm Gene. Everybody knows I'm the host of the podcast, but my background is similar to these two gentlemen. All right. So let's get into this, guys. As you know, let's take ourselves back to before 4 or 5 years ago when we all worked together and we were kind of in that space of doing quality analytics. Would you call that the hardest problem in healthcare, getting all the data?
John, why don't you kick us off?
There's a lot of variability in measures. NCQA is fond of saying that the measures that they publish are not their measures, they're America's measures. They just take them and they implement them. If you're familiar with the NCQA to quality measure development process, there are roundtables, there are multiple people they speak to. Everybody needs to be measuring the same thing. And frequently, especially with smaller organizations, or in my experience, sometimes state organizations that work with Medicaid are a big one. They come up with their own analytics processes. They come up with their own measures that aren't aligned with anything. It is very important, more so than the data collection part even, which is its own difficulty, but it's very important that everybody is aligned on the same page. They are measuring the same things, and frequently these organizations are not.
Yeah, I agree. This is a complex problem that organizations face. A lot of the issues stem from quality improvement departments just being siloed from the rest of the organizations, especially IT departments, which they rely so heavily upon. You know, quality improvement departments are a lot clinical and don't have some of the expertise or a lot of the technical knowledge that is needed to really implement a good quality reporting platform and being able to support the organization, which requires so immensely on that measurement reporting.
Yeah. And over the years, there's been just a lot of investment in the area. So how do you run a healthcare organization? How do you run a health insurance plan, right? Depends on things like risk adjustment, analytics, quality measurement. And then there's actually a lot of incentive structures in place to enable this kind of measurement, right? I was just at this FHIR camp. Unfortunately, we don't have anything like HEDIS or NCQA, right? And it's, definitely unique to the United States. I think my own frustrations with it has always been on the side of just all this work doesn't go directly to the consumer, right? It doesn't go directly to the patient. Also, taking advantage of where we're at now with FHIR and interoperability, what do you see as the biggest opportunity there to really make this work count, as opposed to, maybe just these back-end processes, right? Like if you were in our spot, what we do, what the value is that, the team brings. But if you're outside of that, you probably don't even know that insurance companies even do this, right? So what are your thoughts?
I'd like to address first the point that you brought up about Europe. Our system is significantly different than Europe. Europe has, I think like Germany has a semi-private system, but the bottom level is handled by the government. Most of these are socialized medicine systems. And the issue that you face in the United States is we've made it a consumer choice. When you want to go buy a car, Jane, what do? You look at reviews, you try to figure out what the product you're buying is, you try to figure out if it's a reliable product, if it meets your needs. We have taken our healthcare paradigm in this country and productized it. Go to Penny or go to one of the other marketplace exchange websites, and you'll see 15, 20, 30 plans available there at varying price points and not a lot of information for you to figure out how you're going to purchase, what you want to put your hard-earned money towards. Is it going to give me the coverage I need? Will I be able to afford the healthcare I need? If something catastrophic happens to me, will this plan cover me? And from my point of view, data sets like HEDIS or other quality measurement systems are akin to the consumer reports of healthcare. And you see that with Medicare Advantage plan scoring. You see that with commercial scoring. If you don't know what the product you are purchasing is, how can you purchase a product that meets your needs?
Yeah, I think fundamentally, we've lost sight of why we measure quality in healthcare. It's, the sophisticated ecosystem with CQL logic, FHIR infrastructure, specifications. But what does it do to make healthcare better? It's just become a mechanism to, satisfy regulatory requirements and maximize payments. I mean, where's the benefit for all of this? How are these results getting into the hands of the people who impact care, the consumers who make the decisions, the providers who provide the quality clinical healthcare that we're supposed to be receiving? Where is the measure report? That's what I want to see when it comes down to it. We get into FHIR and clinical quality measurement. That is where the rubber meets the road, getting the results of this clinical data back into the hands of the people who want it and need it and will leverage it to make healthcare better.
Well, with the scoring, like you said, you do see it with Medicare plans. You'll see commercials. Oh, we have a 5-star Medicare plan. We have a 4-star Medicare plan. But other plans, you don't have that information. You don't, like I said, it's a marketplace issue. You don't know what you're purchasing. There's not enough information out there for the consumer. So if we expect quality improvement and quality measurement to be useful moving forward, it needs to be more consumer oriented.
Yeah. So let's get into the difference and how now you guys probably know more about measure development than a lot of people out there. What do you say is like the biggest difference between doing the traditional, what has been done before? And obviously we worked with various different ways you can do that with, you're developing your own in-house solution or going out and subcontracting with a vendor that provides a solution, hard coding measures, right? To kind of like the new world of FHIR and CQL. And I think a lot of people I've heard are also now going through the same process of should we buy a solution or should we build our own, which is like the same thing that was 10, 15 years ago with HEDIS engines. You have the same thing now with CQL engines, right? So what do you think are the learnings there and your thoughts on the transition to kind of doing it now with NCQA providing you the code for CQL potentially that you don't have to develop, but you do need an engine to run it on.
Yeah, it's a mind shift. You've really got to wrap your head around clinical data, not as just writing procedural logic. You're writing clinical logic, in terms of resources and semantics. SQL-based solutions were very data warehouse heavy, customized to your organization, but this isn't just new syntax. This is a mind shift towards interoperability. It's about building queries to define clinical intent, not just building queries based off of how you have the data modeled in your own ecosystem.
And in the old days, it was a very complex undertaking. You got, just in the case of HEDIS, you got your volume 2, you were told, and figure out how you're going to implement this. We don't, you come back to us and have this data, but how you implement it is up to you. So you had to define the schema, you had to define the program, you had to build everything from the ground up. With CQL on FHIR, that is no longer a problem. The schema is defined for you. In the case of HEDIS, NCQA supplies the CQL. There are a handful of competing CQL evaluators out there right now. It is expected that the industry will coalesce around 1 or 2 endorsed engines in the near future, but the low-level parts of the process are abstracted away for you now. You don't need to define your schema. It's all in the IG. You don't need to build an interpreter engine. It's out there for you. You don't need to write the CQL if you're reporting HEDIS. In the case that you do have to write the CQL, some of the more complex and error-prone parts of database development in the past are no longer an issue. We've moved from a relational model to a flat document model. So a lot of the risks with database development have gone away over the past few years, which makes it easier to put these together. It's just a matter of watching what the industry coalesces around in the next 2 or 3 years.
And building the infrastructure in
Yeah.
your organization to support that. That's
Oh,
Right.
a
absolutely.
major
And
undertaking.
I think that's the $1 million question, right? You hit the nail on the head, Eric. And I think a lot of organizations are asking themselves that right now. And from what I understand, there's a lot of payers out there that are just getting into this, and also a lot of provider organizations that are getting into this. And honestly, there's not a lot out there in terms of resources for you. If you have been involved in some of the HL7 working groups that have been going on for a while. There's the NCQA working groups, there's digital quality implementers, there's other, but honestly, those have not included, I would say majority of the kind of traditional healthcare organizations. So I think there's going to be a big learning curve. And what really I think is the big switchover and the big change is the also going from claims to clinical data to go into EMR data, right? So that's the data that is directly flowing in from an EHR potentially, or it could be going from an EHR to like a TEFCA QHIN, right? The Quality Information Network, or and then a QHIN, and then that is retrieved for specifically HEDIS purposes. But who is checking that data, right? Like, I think the big difference will be that a lot of the folks in quality, particularly, are expected to work with, your claims tables, your claims data warehouse has good data. And that generally, it goes through adjudication, it goes through all sorts of curation processes. And I think that from a clinical data perspective, it's going to be a lot of learning and a lot of kind of adjustments to make that data as usable as the claims data is right now, even though it runs on, many different variations of people's interpretation of what HEDIS measure should be, right? We'll have the code. So it'll kind of be a reverse problem. The code will cease to be a problem and the data will become a much bigger problem, I think, in the future. You guys agree with that?
Well, let's be honest, payers are conservative organizations. They stick with what works. They go with what has been working for them, because why change when the pain of changing is greater than what it brings you? So with these recent government mandates like Kill the Clipboard, we're moving into mandated interoperability. And up until this point, for a lot of these organizations, FHIR has been a cost center. So they might have a few people in a cube farm somewhere with a copy of an IG, and they're told, here, take this data, take this claims table, take this Epic output, and turn this into FHIR just so we can fulfill our bare low-level requirements or low-level obligations. So what we're seeing now with FHIR that's produced that way is it is technically correct. It matches the implementation guide, but it is not clinically useful. There are something like 3 different ways to format a measure report. All of them are compliant to the specification. Neither of them are, all 3 of them are not interoperable with each other. So there's a lot of space for these people that are implementing it to create problems further down the line. And that is why you need people who understand FHIR, people who are hip deep in the HL7 infrastructure, who understand what's going on to groom this data, to make something useful out of it.
Yeah, education is so paramount in all of this. Having people who understand the specification, understand the API, understand, FHIR at its base level. But beyond that, it's championed at organizations who understand the value of FHIR, maybe not the detail and the technologies, the root level, but understand that this is the future. This is where healthcare is headed, and to stand behind the people who are willing to work through these implementations and bring up these clinical quality engines and support progress.
There is the other issue, as you said, Gene, of the claims data. We've always used claims data for quality measurement because claims data is consistent. Providers want to get paid. The claims data is the most consistent source you have, so a lot of our logic behind quality measures rely a lot on the artifices of that claims data. POS codes, like things like that are important for quality measurement, but don't necessarily exist in an EHR context. You're not going to find POS codes for the most part on EHR data. So there needs to be a shift from the claims-based way of thinking to working with what is out there in this EHR data, working with what is out there in this clinical data. The shift away from the paper mindset can't come soon enough, as far as I'm concerned.
But there is a transition to that. While we can leverage current, FHIR resources, explanation of benefits, which models adjudicated claims quite well and is supported by CARE and BB, it's supported by HEDIS Core. It's a challenge to map some of this data, but it's not overwhelming. This is a way to get the needle headed in the right direction before we can think about fully integrated healthcare, where we're getting this data straight from the EHR and into our quality reporting engines.
Do you think that is possible without? Because when I think about like an end-to-end solution and I think of quality, I think about like generally quality measurement runs on top of data that has been already curated. So for example, we had our curated data warehouse, kitchen, whatever, nice kitchen that was put together. Somebody spent money on that and they made sure that was a very nice kitchen. And can you do that in a, Winnebago kitchen with a little tiny microwave and maybe one burner there as a stove? Can you cook up quality measures with that? Or you really have to think twice about that. And I think that people sometimes misinterpret interoperability with I can just plug in and start running quality measures on top of any of this data, right?
Well, for running in a Winnebago kitchen, the gray water tank's getting mighty full.
My family decided to rent a motorhome for a vacation a couple of years back, and it ended up having that problem, John.
Oh,
The
that's
tank
no
was
fun.
bad, and it was not fun at all.
I'm sure you guys ate while you were in this Winnebago, and that we all have to eat. So everything we do along this path to full interoperability is a step in the right direction. We can learn lessons as we learn the FHIR spec, as we map our current data into FHIR to support, dipping our toe into clinical quality measurement in the digital space. So we're not all going to get, a 5-star kitchen right off the bat, but we all have to eat and we all have to start somewhere.
You can't wait for a perfect situation because it's never going to come. You've got to start with what you have. You got to play cards with the deck that you've got.
I just want to emphasize the fact that this doesn't replace the need for SQL and analytics and relational databases. SQL gives us precision and control and transparency. Well, CQL is really just used to answer a specific question, whether it's, does this patient or event satisfy certain measure criteria, or, is this the right clinical workflow for a patient, or, this eligibility check for the correct product or benefit. So, there will always be a need for CQL and writing queries to get the full picture of for advanced analytics and the deep data exploration that really just you can't get from CQL and these clinical quality measures, which are so focused and
No,
built to a task.
and to be blunt, the performance is a quality of magnitude and difference. It's an immense difference. These things work hand in hand. You need a comprehensive SQL data warehouse if you expect to do full scale analytics in a reliable and responsive fashion. You can't just rely on CQL alone, but the output of CQL can be used in the form of measure reports and other artifacts, make these to supply these SQL databases. The one doesn't replace the other. I've heard people in the past say, oh, well, CQL just completely replaces our data warehouse. No, it doesn't. The document store format of CQL, of CQL backing stores it serves a different purpose than the traditional SQL data warehouse, and they work together.
100%.
They enhance each other. Yeah, they enhance each other, but they do not replace each other. And I think to a degree, there's a lot of anxiety out there in the industry that this technology is going to replace existing ones. Existing technologies still have their place in use, and they will continue to.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually think that CQL is a great format for capturing the actual requirements themselves and essentially giving NCQA the ability to provide coded measures that are not just implement, here's our written requirements, like here's actually how we interpret this measure, which FHIR resources you need to use for them, which value sets, how the logic and all the exclusions and all the other things that are generally in a measure, how they work. And I honestly think there is a possibility to use that to generate SQL. And I actually have a project I'm working on, hoping to share it soon. And I'll be presenting at the analytics conference for SQL on FHIR in December, and I'm hoping to have something to show to prove my point. But essentially, I think it is doable, very doable to create a translation layer. So just like SQL on FHIR creates view definitions that flatten FHIR resources, we can do the same thing with CQL and essentially create computable layer from CQL. So still very much using CQL, just not expecting it to be the executable code, which you can convert to SQL and then run it on a system that 99% of organizations already have, right? So yeah, I think that that's potentially like also letting people use what they already know for population health and other things.
As you said, you could almost, because of its readability, treat CQL as a sort of pseudocode indicating to you what the intention was from the measure stewards. And that has immense usefulness of itself.
Right, right.
Agreed.
All right, so time for a spicy take. Do we still need quality measures in the age of AI? And I don't know what's going on with HHS and the CMS and all the other conversations are happening with this clipboard and all of this stuff that's going on. Like, do we still need quality measures?
Yes, we still need quality measures, but we need to get back to what quality measures are intended to do: improve quality. They can't be a checkbox for regulations. Mechanism to maximize billing and financial payments. Let's get back to improving quality by focusing on outcomes and getting metrics, trends in the hands of the providers and the members who can best utilize these metrics and measures.
And then there's a corollary. Just speaking for Medicaid and Medicare, there is a lot of taxpayer money involved in that. And it is an abdication of responsibility to the taxpayer, from my point of view, to not measure what the taxpayer's dollar is being spent on. So even just from that point of view, even cutting commercial or marketplace out, if we're not measuring what we're spending money on, it is a profound abdication of responsibility.
And you can't really do value-based care if you don't have some sort of a yardstick saying, hey, this is meeting some standard across the board, right? Or
Can't do value-based without the value, right?
right. But I do think that, to your point, Eric, also is that it does have to be away from this kind of more administrative implementation of quality to a patient-centric and overall more proactive rather than reactive, right? Calculation of measures as well, as much as possible.
Yes, well said.
So let's talk a little bit about AI and LLMs and get your thoughts on this. I have been, I think it's no secret, I have been playing around with now Claude Code and building all kinds of apps in my free time. I love it. It's kind of given me like these superpowers that I never had in terms of like never been a real, software engineer. Just kind of came out as a kind of data analyst guy and been around data for a long time. But I really like it in terms of that. What do you feel like AI is good at, not good at? What is your experience with it? And then maybe we can go into like your learnings for others in this space.
From my point of view, I think LLMs and AI are a powerful tool to help the consumer or the patient decide on a course of action. I do not think they replace clinicians. I think there is a point of view in the industry that we can use it to some degree to replace clinicians and to reduce load on clinicians. To be completely blunt, the shortage of clinicians in healthcare can only be solved by bringing more clinicians in. The apps can help steer people towards the best choices for them. AI can give them an idea of which direction they want to go, but it does not replace the actual individuals that are providing the care. It's a powerful tool, but it needs to be treated for what it is. It can also mislead you if used improperly.
Absolutely. It's a co-pilot, not necessarily the co-pilot, but yeah, from an implementation side, it's very helpful, suggesting CQL patterns or, doing first passes to create logic, actually quite helpful in creating test cases and edge cases that you haven't quite thought about yet. So leveraging it from that perspective has been immensely helpful. But just if you're curious, hop on an LLM, and find out more about FHIR. It knows a lot that can guide you in your journey to, you know, get deeper involved in CQL and clinical quality engines and, you know, standing up a prototype or some proof of concept that maybe you can then leverage, you know, to find that champion organization who wants to invest and stand behind you and bring up an implementation.
Yeah, and you can do a lot. And if you have an idea, you could actually mock it up and build it and share with people to get some feedback on it, which is what I've done on some of my stuff. And some of it has been good, some of it not so good. But yeah, so what are you guys thinking the most like, I don't know, the best piece of advice that you can give to folks that are kind of like, I think there's a large industry of developers, not necessarily measure developers, but analytics developers, BI analysts, software engineers that are kind of in healthcare organizations, but they've heard about FHIR. I know I was there like what, 4 years ago, John? Like I've heard about FHIR, never did anything with it, and then got a chance to work on stuff hands-on with it. That's how I got into it. What is your guys' having lived through this transition and are in it now? What is your recommendation for other kind of people in your
Well, FHIR is not a cost
this?
center. FHIR is a means to an end. It's not a cost center. If you're going to dedicate yourself to a FHIR strategy, do it all the way. It's not something you can do halfway. You need to, as Eric said, education is key. You need to know what you're doing. You need to know what you're looking at. You need to have a strategy. You can't just throw an implementation guide at a data analyst and say, take this data from our claim system and turn it into FHIR and do it as quickly as you can and as inexpensively as you can, because all you're going to do is cause problems downstream. Those problems propagate. A provider or a payer creates dirty FHIR data, that gray water I talked about, that propagates downstream. Now you have other people that need clean data and you're feeding them gray water. If you're not going to do it right, don't do it at all.
Be curious, you know, questions. Ask your LLM. If that doesn't work, you go see Gene. He'll point you to one of his connections. And, you know, everyone in the HL7 uh, sphere is super helpful. They want to advance the technology. They want to advance the hard work that they've been doing and build the community and get more and more people involved and would love to talk to you, give you suggestions, point you in the right direction, give you advice. So explore
Yeah,
and talk to people.
yeah, and that if you're not going to do it right, don't do it at all. That was a little bit harsh. So I apologize for that. That was a bit harsh. It's a learning process, and we all did something in the past that we did without knowledge that would have helped us better. So yes, do experiment, get involved with the HL7 community. I was recently at the HL7 Connectathon in Pittsburgh. Everybody is supportive. People are more than happy to help you and donate their intellectual property and their knowledge and their time. It's a completely open ecosphere. Get in there, get your feet dirty, mess with it, play with it, but understand what you're doing. It's all the data is out there. You don't even need to read it all. As Eric said, you can feed these entire implementation guides into an LLM and work in a conversational method with it to learn about FHIR. You don't need to break open that 200-page implementation guide and read it all in a night. You
And
can
there
get
are
started
modern,
small. You can get started with.
that's true. I mean, and there are modern data architecture solutions that store FHIR natively now. You know, shout out to the guys at AidBox who I'm working with right now. It is a solution that, you know, to us, the users of the system, stores FHIR natively. You interact with it with the APIs. So, you know, it's FHIR at its native level. And, you know, to have that kind of solution out there to leverage and build your foundation on, everything just kind of works with it, which is kind of the whole point of what we're building towards. So, you know, there are solutions out there that are so far along and so advanced that, you know, are very cool and are definitely doing the right things for the industry.
And if you're interested in CQL, there is a Zulip channel where you can go and talk to Bryn Rhodes, the man who created CQL. This is an extremely open and available community.
All right, we got the clapping going. So yeah, absolutely. And you know, you can go and I had the chance to see Graham Grieve, you know, the guy, creator of FHIR, and he was at the FHIR camp, and he's involved building things all the time, and he's on Zulip and all these other folks, Gino Canessa, which I didn't actually know are full time paid by Microsoft, along with Josh Mandel, MD, and Brian Postlethwaite. They're paid full time to work on the fire standards. So if you have any questions or you have any proposals, uh, there's a lot of resources out there, a lot of dedicated folks that have spent the last, what is that, 13, 14 years now working on fire. So it's really been great learning from them. So um, all right, gentlemen. Well, this has been a great conversation. Anyway, fun fact though, like I think Eric, we're wearing NASA t-shirts by
Yep,
not even
we both
by
are.
without any planning whatsoever. So like
Mm.
how cool is that? And this is my wife actually got me this when she went to NASA and as part of her job. So yeah, we're big supporters of NASA, I guess, around here. Huh, Eric?
Or just have really good taste.
Yeah.
Get a plug in here for NASA. Well, you're right next door to the Space Coast, aren't you, Eric?
Just down the road, just outside of Orlando. Embarrassing to say, we have not made it to Kennedy Space Center yet. It is on our list of things to do. Not yet. Actually, the kids went for a field trip, but the family has not done it yet.
Wasn't like that movie Space Camp from the 80s, was it?
And no, they did not get launched into space, much to their disappointment.
Oh, that's good at least.
Very cool. So thank you guys for hopping on. This has been a great conversation, and I think a lot of folks can learn from a lot of the things kind of where we've went through, and hopefully this is helpful to folks out there. But go check out this podcast and all the other episodes that we have filmed with everybody else. But thank you guys again for your time.
Absolutely. Thanks, Gene.
Thank you.